Discover how real estate investor Mike Mannino defies the odds and builds massive wealth through strategic investments as he navigates the unpredictable world of property acquisition, tax strategies, and market trends to achieve his goal of financial freedom. Learn from his story so you can be a wise investor as well.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
Now, let us learn a little bit about my guest today. Over the past 8 years, Mike has built a business that flipped over 80 houses by the age of 30 and created multiple companies that generate over 1 million per year in revenue, sold tens of thousands of copies of his book, making him an Amazon bestselling author, and is the founder of Real Estate Wealth Builders, which is an educational company that helps real estate investors quickly scale their real estate business. So, Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I will have questions for you on this topic, but before we get into any of those questions I'd love for you to share your story about how you began your real estate companies and became an entrepreneur yourself.
Perfect. Yeah, I'd love to. And if you don't mind, I'll just kind of talk about like mindset for a second, because I think that's extremely important. That's what really separates us from, where we're at today to where we want to be, right? It's just like really what's in between your ears. So I would say, at 13 years old, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is kind of like an ulcer in the stomach. It hurt to eat. And actually I lost a lot of weight because it was less painful to not eat than it was to eat. And that was the biggest blessing of my life, because that really taught me at a young age that life is very valuable, and that, because at 13 years old, you could like break your leg and then go like run a marathon the next week. You're like Wolverine, you're like invincible. So that really taught me like, okay, to appreciate like what we have in our health. So I took life very seriously, and I'm very blessed with a power of, prayer and mindset, eating right from 13 to 16. After 16 years old, I've been in remission, never taken any medication. I was on 16 pills a day, and very blessed for that. And I thank God for that every day. So I feel like I'm on borrowed time, right? And I think that's kind of the mindset portion of it, because I feel like I'm on borrowed time. So I take massive action. So I don't like I don't like think about things for too long. I either say yes or no. So how I first got started into real estate, though, I worked a lot. At 16 years old, I started working at McDonald's for $6.55 an hour up in Michigan. And I worked the legal limit that you could work, which was 20 hours a week as a minor. I was going to school 35 hours a week and then working 20 hours a week. And then I was a busboy at 17 and waited tables at 18. And I graduated high school in 2011. I saved up $14,500. And then in 2012, I actually bought my first house at 19 years old with a loan program called FHA loan, which is a loan program, which is amazing, because I only had to put 3.5% down on the house. And I'm just waiting tables, which was crazy that they gave me a loan at the time, right? And so I'll never forget this. I wrote a check for $7,500, the most amount of money I've ever seen, because I'm like putting away $200-$300 at a time my whole entire life. And I drove a rusted out 2004 Malibu, and it was gold. But I knew like in the long term that piece of property was going to hopefully appreciate in value. But no matter what, it gave me a place to live. And what I did, it was a 3-bedroom house. And I did what's called house hacking. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before. This is something I highly recommend any young person to do this. So if you're listening to this, you got a young child, or, you're in a young yourself. I rented out. All right. So I bought a 3-bedroom house, and my mortgage at the time was $600 a month. And what I did is I cleaned up the house myself. I fixed it up, And then I rented out the other bedrooms for $300 a month each to people I was waiting
Mm.
tables with. So you got to like take a step back, like 19 years old. I own this house. I'm fixing it up. I'm going to community college, waiting tables. And now I have a place to live where the expenses are being taken care of by my tenants who are my friends who I work with. And I'm only paying a third of utilities because they're covering my mortgage. Right.
Hmm.
And I would say it too, as an entrepreneur, that's the way you got to think, like constantly problem solving, right? Like, how do I get a free house? Like, I don't like paying for things. Like, how do I get a free car? I always ask myself, like, free vacations, right? But that's how I got started. So I fixed that up in 2012. I sold it in 2015 for 147,000. And I don't know if I said this, I paid 65,000 for the property. So at 21 years old, I now have this I think it was 60 or $65,000 check, which is 3 years of waiting tables
Hmm.
of salary for me, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, moved back home with mom and dad. And then within 30 days, I bought another house and fixed it up. And that's how my journey began.
Nice. Well, someone may be listening to that too and saying, like, okay, I understand the concept, buying a home that has these extra bedrooms in it, but how do you even find, in your case, it was people you knew, but what if you don't necessarily know somebody who's looking for a place and you still want to do what you did? Like, do you have any recommendations on how to find those people that you can trust, that you can live with, and
Yeah.
hopefully get along? I just see there could be a lot of pros, but there could be quite a few cons on that too. But
Oh,
how do you do that?
yeah. Yeah, I'm a very simple person. My life is there's stories. Cops were called, and I'm at work and my roommates are fighting, right? So,
Mm,
I had like my uncle who's going through divorce at the time who moved in with me. I would It's kind of funny. So, how to find anyone who's good? Like in my business, I look for contractors. I always get asked, Mike, how do you find good contractors, right? And the best thing is referrals. And I would
mhm,
say like referrals, like, hey, do you any college kids, is there a local community college or a university? They want to pay a couple $100 a month for a bedroom. Someone who's waiting
mhm.
table, someone who's young, or someone who's older too. Someone's going through divorce, any situation like that. I don't know. I love Facebook. I'm a big Facebook guy. I find everything on Facebook, contractors, houses, anything. So,
Mhm. Well, and of course, this is kind of how Airbnb began, right? From what I understand,
yeah.
somebody just, needed to rent out some space. And so, do you recommend maybe buying something and using it as an Airbnb property as well? Or what do you think about that strategy?
Yeah, that's definitely a strategy. I'm not even me. I'm a male, and I'm like, I don't know if I want strangers just coming in and out of my house all the time. I'd rather
Hmm.
have like one person. But I have two Airbnbs. They're fine investments, but I wouldn't want a bunch of strangers coming in and out of my house. But what you could do is also buy a duplex, a triplex, or a quadplex, and you can get that with the FHA loan. You can buy up to a 4 unit house. So like a duplex, where they're like right next to each other, and tri and a
Hmm.
quad. And you can house hack that way where you actually rent those out. You can maybe
Hmm.
Airbnb one, you can long-term rent them. So you don't have to do it by bedroom. That's just the route I took, just because I had to be resourceful.
Right.
But yeah, I would say like a duplex, triplex, quadplex would be the best scenario.
Okay. What about apartment buildings? I know up to four is, one
Mhm.
type of loan, but let's say an apartment
Correct.
building that's got, more units or things like that
Hmm.
too. So what are the benefits of, buying an apartment building, or maybe you're buying it to sell it soon? Like, what do you feel about that topic?
No, don't get me started on apartments. I love apartments. I have 65 units right now of apartments that pay us every single month. And I love apartments for three main reasons. One is depreciation, because I have a
Hmm.
fix and flip business you always have a money problem, right? When you don't have money, you have a money problem. Then when you do have money, you got Uncle Sam wants to take half of it. So
Right.
depreciation is a beautiful thing. Actually, just got a call last week. I'm going to pay very little income. I'm going to get a tax refund from the IRS because we bought so many apartments last year, and I'm able to depreciate that off of my active income of flipping houses.
Hmm.
So that was one of the reasons why I love apartment buildings. Number two is, yes, the cash flow. of the property, right? You get a little bit of cash flow. Like when you buy the property, you typically don't get much, and it's going to be over a long-term horizon of
Right.
when you start creating cash flow. But that's going to be my retirement, my nest egg. Like, Social Security is not going to
Hmm.
be there for me.
Hmm.
So I have to go create my own security, right? And then three, which is one of my favorite, is wealth appreciation, because you can actually force appreciate an apartment building versus a house. And what I mean by that is a house is only worth what your neighbors have sold for, right? You can only improve the property so much. And if all your neighbors are selling for 250,000 and you have the prettiest house, you can maybe get 260, 270 for that house, right? Even like if it was the decked out, but you can only go so high. On an apartment building, it's like a business where it's based off of the cash flow, the net operating income. So you, as a good operator, get rewarded for the business being worth more. So if you can increase
Hmm.
rents, decrease expenses by putting in like efficiency for like waters, so like water heads, and we do like new blow fill installations, new windows, and all those different things to decrease our monthly expenses, and then that increases the value of the property. So we're actually working on one right now. We bought a 16 unit North Carolina. We paid 900,000 for it last year, and then within 17 months, we're actually refinancing it December 1st, and it should be worth about 1.7 million because we've increased the rents and decreased expenses. And it's hard to do that with a house.
Right, that makes sense. So when you have properties that are multi-tenant, especially apartment buildings too, do you manage all of these yourself? Do you have property management companies so that you're just getting the income and they're handling everything? Like, what would you recommend for someone who's listening to this and says, "I like what you're saying, but that sounds like a lot of work."
Very good question. The goal of the entrepreneur is to do nothing. That's what my first mentor told me. And and I think if you look at it that way, you'll make
Mhm,
better decisions. So
mhm,
I have property managers. I have Airbnb manager. I have property managers because I got apartments in different states. I'm in South Carolina. I got apartments in Michigan and North Carolina. My flipping business is actually in Michigan, 750 miles away from me. And that's because I have a
mm,
really good team to manage that. I can't go to Home Depot. I'm 750 miles away. So I highly recommend finding someone to manage your properties for you. And my partner had 40 something units at the time, and he was managing himself, and he didn't want to pay the management fee. It's about, maybe 10% of the
mhm.
gross income. And he's like, it's not that much work. Maybe it takes me 20 hours a week and I go there a few times a month and it's not that bad. I'm like, okay, but you got to remember the opportunity cost it's going to cost you. Because if you're spending
Right.
20 hours a week managing this property, your time is spent doing that
Mhm,
versus last year we just went out and bought another property to create, about $700,000 in equity. But you're worried about saving $18,000 a year in management fees,
mhm.
right? So it's like a short-term mindset of worrying about saving a nickel and stepping over a dollar.
Mhm. Right. So obviously, sometimes you're going to buy properties to hold them for long term. Like you said, you're not going to have Social Security. So you need to have this revenue that's going to be coming in over time. But then you've also talked about buying to flip and sell. So, how do you identify which properties you really want to hold for the long term and which properties you should just get in, get them fixed, sell, make the money?
You ask very good questions. You must own a lot of real estate. So I'm from Michigan. I actually moved to South Carolina a year and a half ago, and there's a trend going on since COVID where people are exiting the Midwest. So
Hmm.
if you look, I think it was Redfin's 2022 data, where Michigan had a net negative of 10,000 people. North Carolina had a net positive of 100,000 people. South Carolina 80, Georgia 80, Kentucky I think 40 or 60,000 positive, Florida 300,000, right? Something crazy.
Hmm.
So, long-term horizon, because these are long-term investments, right? So if you're going to buy a rental for a long time, I'm looking out at least 10 years down the road. And
Hmm.
if North Carolina is bringing in 100,000 people a year, right? And it's not a huge state, 7 million people in the state, maybe like 8 million people in the state. You bring in 100,000 people a year over 10 years, that's an extra million people. And then if Michigan in the Midwest, because Michigan, Ohio, the Midwest is all shrinking, then you're going to have a net negative of 100,000. I mean, if you want to laugh, people think Detroit is coming back. It is not. You can Google Detroit's population over the last 30 years. It was 1.5 million. Now it's 750,000 people. And you see this graph on Google, and it's like, would you put your life savings into something like this where people are just exiting? So we fix and flip in Michigan. We're actually, over the long term, going to sell our long-term investments and then move it to the South where people are moving, because it's just the long-term play of basic supply and demand of people is going to pay off over time.
Mm-hmm. So do you find agents then in these areas that you're interested in finding some properties, and they're looking for you, and then they present to you some ideas, or are you finding them yourself? Like, how do you even find the properties you're interested in?
Yeah, that's another good question. I wish it was as easy as finding an agent. So our houses, I've done over 80, only 3 of them came from real estate agents. The rest were before we go to the real estate agent. So we spend $7,500 a month in marketing to find these houses before they get listed, before they go to foreclosure. So we are doing mailers, and we're targeting people who are behind on their payments, behind on their property taxes, recently inherited from grandma, and they have this house, recently had an eviction at the house. Right. So we're targeting pain points, and we're going to them saying, hey, we are a solution. If you'd like a cash offer for your house, we can help you. Right. So that's what we do. Same thing in the multifamily as well.
I see. So you're going direct to the potential seller saying, we're interested in your property. And if they're interested in, making a deal, you've just, got that kind of worked out with them, and you don't have to
Yep.
wait for something to be on the market. That's smart.
And the nice things too, you can work out really awesome terms as well. So I've bought a lot of apartments with seller financing, because a lot of the people we buy from are in different stages. Like, I'm in the growth stage, and they're in the, they're getting rid of their properties. They're in the retirement stage, right? So there's, taxes is such a huge thing. If you've owned a property for 30 years, you probably depreciated it. So what that means is when you go to sell it, let's say for $1 million, that whole thing could be taxable at that $1 million, right? So then we can offer seller financing. We're like, hey, what are you going to do with the money? This is how we present it. Like, what are you going to do with the money? Let's say you get $1 million. What are you going to do with it? Well, I'm just going to put it in my Chase bank account at 0.02%, earn a nickel a quarter, and just live off that. I'm like, how about this? I have maybe a possible better solution. How would you like, if we give you some down payment, and then we give you, an interest rate, 4 or 5%, because we're going to get that from the bank. How about we give you 4 or 5%, and it's secured by the property you've owned for 30 years. And here's the great part. You're going to hope and pray that I miss my payment. Because I would ask, what happens if you miss a payment? Oh, you're going to hope and pray. Because I usually put about $200,000 into my properties because I'm increasing the rents. So you're going to hope and pray, because I'm going to give you a down payment. I'm going to improve the property, roof, windows, cabinetry, flooring, doors, and trim. And if I miss my payment, then you get it back. You keep my down payment. You've kept the monthly cash flow, and now you have a property that's worth way, way more money because I put $200,000 into the property. But Mr. Seller, you don't have to worry about that, because we pay on the 26th of the month, even though it's due on the 1st. So we pay 45 days in advance.
Nice. Well, what about the fact that obviously real estate goes up and down? We know, like, over a long period of time, you're going to have appreciation, but we have these trends, right, where things drop, and there's, maybe some concern that, oh, I'm going to buy something and then I'm going to be on the wrong side of, the purchase. So what do you say about that type of situation? Like, what is the risk in buying this real estate compared to other types of investments that could be made?
I'm going to take you, we're doing a Key West event in January. I'm going to have you come up, and you're going to help run the event, because you ask amazing questions.
Thank you.
So that is a very good question. So I'm actually extremely risk adverse. So I'll
Mhm.
talk about my single family business. So we buy first time home buyer homes. So these are the
Mm.
1,000 square foot homes, and they're worth like 200 to 250,000 when we're done renovating them. We're paying about 100 for them, putting 50, 60,000 into them. So what I love about these houses, so let's say I buy, I fix it up and we can't sell the house. Like, the market's turned, interest rates are 8.5%, which they are today, right? And like, what's the worst case scenario? Well, the worst case scenario, I usually have, about $50,000 in equity in these houses. I can do a refinance and then just keep it as a rental. Then I have a brand new rental. I might not make much money on them, but then when the market turns, I can always sell them. So that's why I don't do
Mhm.
luxury houses. I've been asked for years, Mike, how come you don't, hey, you could buy this house for 1 million, put 300,000 into it and go sell it for two. Yeah, you can do that 2% interest rates, but right now you'd be sitting on that house and the non-homestead
Mhm.
property taxes would eat you alive.
Right.
That's what,
Mhm.
risk mitigation on the single family houses, we buy the small ones where you can't even, if you notice, no one builds 1,000 square foot houses anymore because the replacement cost is too high. That's why I love these houses. There's four different types of buyers. The first time home buyers who are moving out of an apartment building. There's landlords who want to buy it and just turnkey rental. There's people who
Mhm.
are downsizing because they're empty nesters, the kids left. And then one of my friends bought it for their parent. So this is a house that has multiple buyers that everyone is looking for and can afford.
Mhm.
If you have even making $40,000-$50,000 a year, you can afford one of my houses. So the risk for that's very low.
Perfect.
And then to speak to
What
the
a Mhm.
multifamily,
Mhm.
I would say over the last few years, there are people who are sweating right now. I know some people who are sweating because, so I have a rule again, and if you are investing in multifamily, this is going to be huge. And actually, if you take on any type of debt, so what has been happening since 2020, interest rates are really low, 2-3%. A lot of people were buying variable interest rates because the Fed said they
Mm.
weren't going to increase interest rates till 2024, and we know that it's not true.
False.
Um, false, right? So what I have done, so I have friends who are in their deals are struggling right now because they bought in very expensive, a $10 million property it was at 3%, now it's at 7%. Now
Mm.
your interest rate's gone up 4% and $10 million. That's a bad day, right?
Right.
Um, so what I always do is I buy fixed, even though it's more expensive. Even
Mhm.
though when we go to refinance, if we do that within like the one I was telling you about, we're refinancing in 17 months, we're paying a 2 point penalty because we're refinancing. But that's okay. I like the security of having a 10-year term fixed so that
Right.
like we're refinancing one right now at the highest interest rates possible. And my partner's like, Mike, we could go with the 3-year fixed. It's a little bit cheaper. And I'm like, I don't care. We're going with the 10-year fix because we don't know, right? They could go up to
Mhm.
18% interest rates. Like we have no idea. So I just like the security of having a fixed interest rate so it's predictable for as
Mhm.
long as possible.
Right. And that's when you make the decision that a little bit more of an expense is worth it because you know what's going to happen, right? And so I agree with you on that subject too. So what about 1031 exchanges? And some people may not even know what that is, but do you end up doing where I'm going to sell this property, I'm going to turn it into another property through an exchange, or do you just sell it, do what you have to do tax wise and then buy something different?
Good question. So for the single family houses, we just pay the taxes on them because for a 1031 exchange, you have to hold a property for 2 years. In our
Mm,
houses, we
okay.
hold for 4 to 6 months.
Mm,
On the apartment buildings, we were going to do it with one. It was our 6 unit. It was like the first one I bought. And, the gains were 120,000, but, on long-term capital gains, I think it's 20%. I was like, it's not really even, we're going to pay like 18,000 bucks in taxes, whatever it is. And I'm like, it's not even really worth the paperwork to do all that. But yes, I do know
mhm,
people who do that. And I think once the gains get to a point where you're talking $500,000, and I think that's where it becomes very advantageous to do a 1031 exchange.
mhm,
My goal, though, is to really hold these for a very long time. I'm really not looking to sell too many of these, maybe the Michigan ones, but like these North Carolina ones we're picking up. And I'll explain why. It's pretty crazy. So I'm here in Columbia, South Carolina. I went to a restaurant and it was built in 1902. Like you just see like this old train station and now they convert it to a restaurant. And I'm looking at the woodworking. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a gorgeous building, gorgeous woodworking. I was like, I wonder how much and my father's a construction. I'm like, how much would this cost? The coffer ceilings. He's like, at least 100,000 today. I'm like, wow. I was like, how much did it cost back then? And this is crazy. So a house in 1900, guess how much the rent was for a 1,500 square foot house, 3-bed, 2-bath was for in 1900?
I don't know, $10 or $15? I have no idea.
$4 a month.
Mm,
And now what is
wow.
that house renting for?
A lot.
Close
Way
to
more.
2,000 a month, probably on average, 1,500 to 2,000 a month, that same house, right? So if you have that, and that's, 120 years, that's an extreme example, but it shows you the power of, holding long term. It's really funny. I looked this up last week. So this one property I was talking about, North Carolina, 16 units. I was like, how much did it cost to build this thing? Because it's worth 1.6 million right now. And back in 1960s, when this was built, the average house cost 18 to 20,000 to build. And I'm like, okay, so cut that in half so probably 10,000 per unit, 16 units, costs 160,000 to build. It's worth 1.7. In 60 years, it's 10x. So if it does the same thing in 10x's in another 60 years, that's $17 million. So why would I sell it for the quick 200-300 grand now, right? So that's why I have the very long-term mindset of picking up as many at least as possible, and long-term it'll take care of you.
So just for anyone who doesn't know what a 1031 exchange is, can you just give a definition?
Yeah. And I'm not an accountant and I'm not that smart. So here's my understanding of it. It's where you sell a property and you have to buy a like kind property. So let's say I sell the 16 unit. I have to buy a like kind property. So like maybe another apartment building. And it has to be, I think, equal or more than what I sold this one for. So if this one I sell for 1.7 million, I would have to buy something more that's worth more. And typically that's what happens. It's because, what I would do is if I did sell the 16 unit, I would have probably, $600,000 left over. And then I would put that $600,000 on a down payment, probably on a 48 unit apartment building. Right. And then again, that would take more depreciation and, all the things, reset all that depreciation schedule again. But 1031 is selling a property for more. And then the nice thing is that $600,000 gains I had on the 16 unit actually don't pay, because I'm putting it toward the 48 unit apartment building, because it is like kind and it's worth more than what I sold the previous property for.
Right. So if anyone's interested in doing that, talk to somebody who can guide you to make sure you do everything the right way. So
if you don't mind, just because it's not like, oh, okay, what Mike told me and I'm going to go do this. No, there's actually like companies out there who do this for you. So, and you're not allowed to touch the money. It has to be in a separate account, escrow account. So yeah, there's companies out there for you. So if you're interested in that, reach out to them. It's because some people try to do this on their own and like, oh, I just did 1031 exchange. Like, well, that wasn't a 1031 exchange. You have to pay the taxes on it. So just a little PSA.
Surprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, I know this has been a really informative topic. I know there's a lot of people who are probably listening thinking, this sounds like a great strategy. I need to start looking into this for myself, for, guaranteeing myself some income when I get older and retiring. So I appreciate your taking the time to talk with me about this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You're very welcome. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. And so I know we're at the end. I want to ask if you have any offer that you would like to share with our listeners, and also how can they connect with you if they want more information?
Yeah, so I have a free gift for you guys. So if you're interested in, since we talked about multifamily so much, I'll give you the multifamily gift. So if you go to 175kdeal.com, 175kdeal.com, I have a free 20-minute video. We actually wholesaled a 28-unit apartment building and made $175,000. That's why it's called 175K. That's how much we made on this apartment building. And it's kind of like those infomercials, like no money down, no credit. Like it was. And I walk you through what we call underwrite an apartment building, analyze the numbers, finding the future value, and then how to articulate that to a potential buyer and understand, like, I go websites like Spot Crime for crime in the area and looking up the income, because that's very important. You want to look at crime and income. So if you're interested in multifamily, go check that out. It's free. So 175kdeal.com. And inside of there is I think a link to my free Facebook group. It's called the Real Estate Wealth Builders. I'm in there. I post once a day and I answer any questions. We do free trainings. I actually just finished up a 3-day event last night. We like how to find deals, how to finance your deals, and how to renovate deals. I always get asked those questions. So I host free events, and actually January 10th and 11th, 2024, we are going to Key West. It'll be a ton of fun. So we're going to Key West, and I'm doing my first live event. And selfishly, I wanted to choose Key West. I've been there for the last 2 years, and I fell in love with the place. And it's a good place to go in January, where everyone else is freezing, and it's 80 and sunny there every day. So
nice.
And if you want to check that out, you can go to it's called Rew Builders, REWBUILDERS.com for Real Estate Wealth Builders. And you'll find the Key West. And the best way to get in contact with me is through that Facebook group. So if you want to get in contact with me, I'm in there. I post every single day. You can comment in there. You can message me. I'm big on Facebook. I got like 12,000 followers, and I have a black and white photo. And my name is Mike Mannino.
Nice. Well, thanks again. Like I said, I found this informative. I enjoyed our discussion, and I really appreciate your sharing your wisdom.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate sharing my wisdom and helping, entrepreneurs.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope you found this topic interesting and enjoyed the informative discussion. Would you please share my show with those you know and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform? I'd really appreciate your support. If you have any additional questions or comments, be sure to reach out to my guest at any of the links that they shared, or you could send me a message at media@abandp.com. I hope you can join me for my next interview, and remember, you can connect with me on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and my website is abandp.com. This episode is sponsored by Affordable Bookkeeping and Payroll Services. If you are overwhelmed trying to handle the financial aspects of your business, AB&P is here to help. Contact us today to discuss your needs at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.